All right. Hello, friends. I hope you had a good health break. Just to recap, if we have people joining us who weren't there in the morning, we had two wonderful speakers. We had Eric Windler from jack.org. We had Andy Sharma sharing her own very personal, very inspirational story. And what a morning it's already been. Next up, we're going to talk about health and wellness in the workplace. Before we do that, let me just remind you of a couple of things. Number one, for those of you who know Hats On for Awareness, I'm sure you know them as a place where you can get a good party on, right? They have their Hatscarade event every year, and Eric was sharing some pictures of being there. It's the hats are on, people are having a good time. This is much more serious. This is the other side of mental health awareness and helping mental health initiatives. Yes, it's a party worth celebrating if you're raising money for mental health initiatives, but there's also some very, very serious stories there. And that's what today is about, sharing some of those stories and also giving you resources so that you can, help others and help yourself as you continue in life, in your everyday life. All right. So another thing to mention was the 50/50 hats on 5050.ca. Amy, if you can share that link one more time, that's the website. You can get 50/50 tickets to support Hats On for Awareness. Again, this is not a fundraiser. This is just a fun opportunity for you to, make a couple of bucks for fun while you're here attending this event. All right, so we're going to continue. Let me introduce our next speaker. She has a wide range of experience in human resources. Currently, she's the Chief HR Officer at Aurelia Soldiers Memorial Hospital. She's going to be speaking about mental health and wellness in the workplace. Debbie Singh, I'll turn things over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for allowing me the opportunity to have a few minutes of your time this morning. So, as you will likely see, there will be no PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to have open discussion and dialogue. And so I will be speaking about mental health and wellness directly as it relates to the workplace. And I think as I start off there, I don't know that there's much more that I can talk to you about what is actually happening, as much as I can maybe give you some ideas and thoughts on potential solutions. So before we get into that, Amy, are you able to bring up our second question of two that we have? I would love to be able to do a poll. And if we're able to, I wanted you to think through, as you're in your work world, what is the one word that would describe how people are feeling as they're going through the pandemic? And if you can just type those in, that would be great. And as you're typing them in, again, it's that one word that resonates for you of what's happening at work, that description. And then we'll give it a minute or two, and then with the great ways of technology, we'll see what everyone has to say. And if you have more than one word, please, by all means, continue to type in. Great. So I think they're coming in. It sounds really good in terms of the words that I'm seeing. So as that comes through, I'm going to give Amy some time to put that together. I wanted to share with you a couple of stories, and they're really quick ones, but I think they're reflective and indicative of what we're going through. And there are two stories that came my way, interestingly, over the last literally 48 hours. So the first story is a colleague, a friend of mine who is in HR, who reached out to share her insights of what happened to her during the day. And that is the story of an individual, a young gentleman, who is having difficulties at work and really struggling, and had actually declared to his leader that he was having mental health issues. And so the boss, his immediate reaction was, oh my goodness, okay, so today can be your last day, and then you can go home and you can focus on what you need to do, and you can come back to work when you feel you're better. And my colleague friend called with such both despair and disappointment, because she felt that in that moment, that leader could have done something completely different that could have changed how this individual dealt with the situation. And so she gave him some wise guidance, which was, did you do the right thing, or what could you have done differently? And the leader said, I didn't know what to do. He said he wasn't well, and how was I supposed to react? And so she walked him through what would have happened in those moments, which actually transpired with the young gentleman going home, living at home with his parents being exceedingly upset, calling the ministry, and then calling my colleague to ask why, what, and how this happened. And that wasn't really the support that he would have needed. And so what ended up happening is the young gentleman called my colleague for support and walked through what was happening to him and asked for some support. And in actuality, all he needed was a bit of some time off and some time to think through what was going through him. There was some self-harm, so she was walking him through some additional resources. And so he felt very supported. And he felt supported because she listened and she asked the right questions and didn't make any assumptions. And so to close off that story, she actually went back to the leader and actually coached and gave him guidance and said, okay, and we understand what you did in this situation. Was it the right thing, and what could you do differently? And so going through it, gave him some guidance on, did you actively listen to what he was trying to tell you? Did you ask questions? Did you ask what he needed for support versus assuming what he would need? And so those were really good learning moments. So that's just an example of one small story that happened the other day. And the other quick one that I will give you is another colleague of mine who is in my exact profession of HR. And it shows you how mental health in the workplace can cause strain. So she is a professional of 20 plus years and resigned without a job, without anything, because the pressure that has been put on her as it relates to dealing with mental wellness in the workplace has caused so much strain that it's compromised her own wellness. And she feels that she's not able to support the employee base in the way in which they deserve. So how interesting to show you two very distinct and different examples of how mental health can impact us in the workplace. And we see that every day, and I think that we will continue to. And I'm sure that you have your own stories as well, equally. So thank you for giving me the time to actually share those quickly. Wondering if we might have the Wordle up. Excellent. Wow, exhausted. That's huge. Worried about the future, trapped, juggling, grind, impatient, anxious, competing demands, uncertainty, never ending. So exhausted and busy, those are huge. And worried about the future. The reason why I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were is that for every single person that's on this call, you will have responded differently, and your words have meaning, and your words correlate to the simple fact that we're dealing with a lot of mental health and wellness at work. It will come out differently, but it happens nonetheless. So take a look at those words, and as you walk away from today's session, remember, maybe somebody's going to come by and have a conversation with you, and maybe they use some of these words. Beg the question why, and try to have a better appreciation and understanding as to why they feel the way they feel, how they got to this point, and what can you do to help support. And you're not here to answer all the questions, but you are here to be able to listen. And that's a really big proof point of what I'll be speaking about this morning. So thank you for that, Amy. That's great. So I will continue on with wellness at work and give you a few key words that I like to use that I hope resonate for you. And one is connectedness. And I relate that back to value. So as we are in the work world, we all know that we want to feel valued at work. We hear that every day, and more often than not now, more than ever. And so I relate that word a little differently now, and I translate value to actually mean belonging. And what does belonging mean? I want to feel like I'm part of something. I want to know that I play a part in something bigger, and I want to know that I contribute and how, and that it's important. Not that it's just valued, but it's important. And I'll be acknowledged for that. So that's important as we're looking at mental wellness in the workplace. A lot of us have been working at distance. We are in a remote environment. Some are working in a hybrid environment. Some have had to go in, much like at the hospital where I am. We're almost in every day. And so there's different ways to be able to connect with people and have and show our value. But now more than ever, that's taken a different stance in the sense of belonging and connectedness. We as individuals, and I speak for myself too, we want to know that where we work, people care. And it's not just about the job we do, and it's how we do it, it's why we do it. And what we've learned, especially through the pandemic, is that our time is of value, and we cherish that. And so if you're spending 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day at work, you want to know that that feeling of belonging means something, so that when you're home and you're with your families, you're in the right spot in terms of how you think and how you feel. Those words like exhausted and worried about the future. Imagine having that in your head as you're working. And then when you're home, it's still there. Where is that outlet? How does that actually come? And so I look at it as an employer's duty of care, to care about their staff. And how they do it can come about in many ways. And so I get asked a lot, well, we don't have money. And so it's not about that. It's actually more about the time and the commitment and the investment to look at what our people are going through. And what we always have to remember is we're equally going through it. It just may shape a little differently. And so I'm hoping this morning is just to give you some ideas of things that you can do from small to large as we're dealing with mental wellness in the workplace. So some tips. Some of them are new, some of them aren't, and maybe they may work for you, maybe they won't. So the one thing you could do is look at having a wellness suggestion box. Everybody is going to have an idea or an opinion, and sometimes we simply want those voices to be heard. So putting out a suggestion box can be a helpful idea. And if you can't do it physically, then maybe doing it virtually through an open email address, with that commitment to take in that information and see what happens. A lot of the time, suggestions are phenomenal, and it's not necessarily up to one team or one department to figure out what those solutions should be. Go out and ask. Another might be a commitment from an organization to give a part of their total salary or budget towards wellness. And it makes a statement and a huge impact and difference. And so that means that we are committed financially to support as we need the wellness of our people. A very big one. It's actually one I haven't seen necessarily come out in media or otherwise as yet. The next would be our benefits plans. So I know a lot of companies are going in on their benefits plans and seeing what else they can do to offer that extension of support, what we would classically call an EAP program for employee assistance. What else can we do? I see a lot of people now exploring the opportunities to create, rather than a healthcare spending account, what you call a wellness account, which gives individuals more freedom and flexibility to use dollars that are given to them for wellness approaches that meet their needs, not necessarily what an employer drives as a solution. The other one is more about language and impression. So I'm sure in a lot of organizations, we have these things called sick days. And interestingly, you see in some places, sick days aren't used nearly as much as they used to be. You'd think they would be. And so I challenge employers to consider the language that they use around sick days and flip it on its head. Why not call them wellness days? Do you have to be sick to have a day off? Do you have to justify and legitimize it? Why can't you just have a wellness day without any explanation? And I think by doing that, it positions things in a very different light. And I think that's what this is about. The other thing is to balance work and time off. And so most people talk about work-life balance. I like to look at work-life integration. So how do you integrate your life and what's important to you with work? And realize that not all of us need or can work a full-time 9-to-5 job. Where's the flexibility? Do we have childcare? Do we have elder care? What are the other things that are happening in our lives that could be eased in terms of pressures if we had some flexibility in terms of how we actually get our work done? The other things that we can actually look at would be around looking at Zoom, how we interact with people, whether you're on video or not. There's something to be said for face-to-face conversation. Again, I go back to that connection and connectedness. And so making sure that we're on items like Zoom or FaceTime or Teams or whatever applications we use in work is that we're present. Present meaning that we're looking at that person. We're not typing and doing work at a different time. We want to make sure that when we're conversing with people, they need to know that they're being heard and that they're actually being listened to. And it might seem like something very simple, but it's actually been an interesting business change that we've seen over time. And so to be able to commit that time to someone and look at them, pay attention, lean in, be thoughtful, engage in that conversation, because that's what it should be, is really, really important. Another one that I would say is training. So training for individuals and training for leaders. There are a number of different trainings that we can add to an individual's toolkit. And I can tell you one that we've brought to the hospital is called mental health first aid training. And so really what that does, it's a training that's put on by an external provider, and it allows individuals to understand the impacts of mental health on themselves, but also as it relates to work, and gives individuals tips and tricks of how to see their environment, when to ask the right questions, how to probe in a different way, and how to actually listen to individuals that may be coming forward to speak about issues around mental health in the workplace, and using that leader or individual as an outlet. How do you deal with those situations? Who do you refer them on to? What are the things that you're looking for? And so that training for us has been well received, and we will continue to utilize it throughout our hospital. I think it's a wonderful way to help individuals better have an understanding of the impacts of mental health and wellness, not just in the workplace, but in our everyday lives. And the other one is compassion fatigue training. Depending on the work that you do, you are so close to impacts that are happening. And we have compassion, we continue to have compassion, but it can be fatiguing. So you're taking information, you're trying to deal with situations. Sometimes it's crisis. Who knows what it is, but it bubbles up and it doesn't have a way for us to let it out. And so this compassion fatigue training helps us understand better how we as individuals may or may not compartmentalize what's coming our way, and how do we deal with it? Are we dealing it in a constructive way? Some of us go to the gym, some of us eat, some of us do a variety of things, healthy and not, as it relates to dealing with stress and wellness in the workplace. So those are just a few ideas. And so that I don't speak on and on and on, I wanted to leave you with a thought. And I guess I've been in HR for about 25 years, so that probably tells you how old I am. Looking forward to retirement at some point. But I use this framework that I learned in school, and I share it with you because I think it's helpful. And as we're dealing with mental wellness in the workplace, and we go back and we reflect on the words that you shared, each one of us is a distinct person with distinct ways, distinct styles, distinct approaches. And so the word I come to is inclusion. How are we inclusive? How can we be more inclusive when we consider what's happening in the workplace? Because what's happening in the workplace extrapolates and can happen at home. And as we're living in this world at work, where we're working from home or remote or not, that gets blurred. And so it's really important that when we're looking at mental wellness in the workplace, we're not just looking at an employee as an employee, but we're looking at them as a whole person. So there is this counseling cube, as I will call it, but I'm going to ask you to look at it as a consideration cube. And it's called respectful, or the art of respectful consideration. And so the R is really looking at religious and spiritual identity. E is looking at ethnic, cultural, racial background. S is for sexual identity. P is for psychological maturity. E is for economic class background. C is for chronological development challenges. T is for threats to one's personal well-being. F is for family history and dynamics. U is for unique physical characteristics. And L is for location of residence. So if you take a look at that word respectful, everything that I just said, when you're talking to someone and you take those into consideration, as many as you can, you're treating that individual like a whole person, a whole being. And that's really important when we're looking at mental wellness, because it gives us an open approach to be able to listen. And it's only if we listen that we can actually understand. And from there and understanding, can we only look to support someone. So I will certainly put that in the chat for you, but I have used this actually for the last 10 years of my career, both personally and professionally, and have found it very helpful because I just do it in my head and I just keep remembering what else is there that I haven't considered, what else is there that I haven't thought of. And especially as we're looking at mental health and wellness in the workplace, it comes out in different ways. And so consideration for the individual is actually imperative. So I hope that was helpful, and happy to have any questions or thoughts that anyone may have.
Debbie, thank you so much. That was very, very helpful. I have a friend who he's been a childhood buddy as an HR manager about 25 years. So I also know what age you are without trying. There was no math that needed to be done there. But more important than your age is your experience in this field. And I know that HR is a field that it is not an easy job, and it is often unrecognized based on the stories I've been hearing, confidentially, of course, from my friends, my friend over the years. So thank you for what you do. I don't know if enough people appreciate the work of an HR manager or chief officer in your case. You have questions. This is a great time. I know many of you are in workplaces. You probably have questions, perhaps ones that you feel a little bit reluctant or somewhat inhibited in asking your own employer. Maybe I think this might be a good opportunity for you to ask Debbie. Again, we've created this space where it's a forum where you can ask any questions that you may have. So Debbie, I'm going to ask you one thing. I am not a manager in any way. When I was a manager, I was a terrible manager, and I didn't like telling people what to do. So that came up as an issue from time to time. But I did, I really like that first example of yours. It was very illustrative, where you were saying somebody was saying they are suffering from some mental health issues. And I think many of us would think we're doing the right thing by saying, okay, go home, take a load off, do it. And so I went one step further and I said, okay, so let's say that that's not the right thing to do. Maybe the right thing is to ask the person, as your manager, as your boss, as your leader, whatever the case is, what can I do for you? What is it that I can do for you right now? How can I help you? And I was very proud of myself for about, like 10 seconds. And then I thought, what if the person says, I don't know? Because I imagine with mental health, some people, I have friends who had never had anxiety attacks in their life, panic attacks. And when it happens, and it's very recent, it's all in the last few years, they don't even know exactly what's happening. They need somebody to tell them that, oh, you're just having a panic attack, but they've never felt this level of, one of my buddies was saying, he's a stand-up comic like I am. And he was like, I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. And I've been performing comedy for 20 years and that never happened. And so what is your recommendation in a situation like that? If somebody says, how can I help you? And their response is, I don't know. What are the next steps there? And just to let you know, you're on mute. You're on mute, of course.
Not now. This is good. I'm watching that little button. And I think that's a great question. So here's the thing. If someone says to you, I don't know, that's okay. And that's the first thing you say is that's okay. Because you know what? We're going to try to figure it out together. And in those moments, what I tend to do is I get them to talk to me and they tell a story. And so I'm listening intently. I don't speak, I listen, and I watch. And so I get them to tell me a story of how they're feeling. It's like the one you just said, you know, I feel this close to my chest, so on and so forth. That's a physical reaction. So you're starting to see things and hear things that are coming out. So that's the one. I'd actually get them to tell me a story of how they feel. You're not directing questions, it's I'm walking you through a journey. So that's important because they're telling it to you in their own voice and they're not trying to tell you what they think you want to hear. They're just getting it out in the only way they know how. So listen and be patient. The second thing that I would do there is continue to ask, what could be something that I could do to help you? If blue sky, anything. And the word that you want to use is what? It is the most powerful word that we can use. It's not how, it's not why, it's what. What can I do to support you? What don't you want me to do so that I don't cause any harm? So the first part again is have them tell the story in their own words. And then by having them tell you the story, ask them what they do in their spare time or what brings you joy, what makes you happy. And so sometimes someone might say, well, you know what? I like to walk. I like to read. I like to cook. I like to eat. And so what you're doing is you're taking that stressor and how they're explaining it, and you're trying to translate it to a positive action that they already know of. So you know what? You're feeling the way you are. Have a little bit of joy. Let's see how we're going to get it. Write it down if that's what you do. Journal, because it has to come from here and here out in a positive way. And that's a start. And by doing that, you start to understand and unpack what it is that they say they don't know. They know, they just don't understand how to explain it. And we shouldn't make an assumption. So I would say commit to listen. So seek first to listen before you seek to be understood. The next is tell the person that you're committed to support, because when someone comes to you, your job is not to answer and find the solutions. Your job is to understand where to direct it. That's really important. And give yourself permission when these things come your way, that it's okay to say you're not really sure, because that's honesty. And in that moment, that's what that person's looking for. So hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have participants live right now, but this presentation is also going to go on, be sent to Hats On for Awareness supporters. So people will be watching this after the fact. And I think that's going to be very helpful, because I think you will find people who are in managerial positions or leadership positions who aren't necessarily trained to think the way you just illustrated. You know, they don't have that maybe thought process. So I think this might be a very good thing, that maybe some team leaders are like, oh, maybe I should talk a little bit to HR and get some more knowledge around around mental health and how to help employees, how to best help my team, my employees. The first speaker we had, Eric Windler, was talking about bringing mental health awareness into high schools so that it can be recognized at an early age. But we can be frank here. There's got to be thousands of organizations that don't have, that they're just now starting, as it's become more of an issue that's affecting work and probably affecting the bottom line. And once it starts affecting the bottom line, then some investigation happens. How can we best serve our employees? So I think this is very useful. I can't imagine they're not going to be people who are like, oh, I've never thought of things that way, even though I am a team lead, and I'm sure things like that will.
I think that's very helpful. And I would say to you that my experience has taught me that when individuals are talking about mental health and wellness in the workplace, they're very much doing it through storytelling.
Okay.
And that's because the divide between work and home is so blurred now. And so when they're speaking, they're not speaking as I am an employee, I'm speaking as an individual. And so that's where that appreciation on our side needs to come in. And they're doing it through storytelling. So the best that we can do is listen. And for anyone that's working by all means, speak to your HR team. They're here to be your partners and help you come up with a plan. You're not here on your own. And for anyone who is on the call and or sees it through video, I am always a resource on the HR side. Happy to support any conversation, any brainstorming as it relates to tips and understanding mental wellness in the workplace. It's such an important thing for us to do right now.
Great. Well, don't retire anytime soon. You still seem so committed to your job, Debbie. Don't start planning your Freedom 55 just yet.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.